When people hear my childhood story, they often ask, how I managed to handle so much at such a young age. But what they don't ask is, why I had to. I grew up in a Black Loyalist community in rural Nova Scotia, and myself, along with my family, experienced firsthand how systemic barriers impact families, like mine. I have two deaf parents, one parent being African Nova Scotian, and again we experienced how institutions designed to provide support often overlook or even harm families like they did to mine. I was just a kid, but I had responsibilities far beyond my years. I wasn't just a daughter. Well, what was I? I was an interpreter, an advocate, a lawyer, a social worker, a doctor. I was a protector of my family. I had to do all these things. I went to doctor's appointments to make sure my parents were heard. I interpreted. I argued with social workers who didn't understand what it meant to be both deaf and Black, in a system that wasn't built for us. The system failed my family at every turn, and in doing so, it failed me too. I grew up fast, not because I wanted to, but because, I had no choice. When the system fails, families usually have to fill in the gaps, and in my case, that burden fell on me, a child, a 5-year-old, a 5-year-old up until I'm 25. I carried the weight of responsibilities that no child, no 8-year-old should have to bear. The guilt of caregiving, the exhaustion of constantly fighting as a child to be understood and for your parents to be understood, and the frustration of watching institutions again and again and again refuse to change. It imposed trauma on me, and that trauma lingers. So even now, as an adult, I replay those moments again and again. The fear of not doing enough, the helplessness of seeing my parents struggle, against barriers that shouldn't exist. But the anger, it lingers. Knowing that these same struggles still exist for other children, like I was, growing up in Black and deaf communities today. So this isn't just about what the system failed to do for my parents. It's about what it forced me to become. I had no choice. Children shouldn't have to be caregivers. No 8-year-old should have to be a caregiver. They shouldn't have to navigate racism, ableism, and systemic discrimination while also trying to protect their families. Nobody should be in that position, but especially as a child, that should not be happening. But it's the reality for a lot of families in marginalized communities, where institutions aren't just failing us, they're actively harming us every day. So cultural understanding, it matters. The intersections of race, ability, and rurality matter. And until the system recognizes that, it will continue to fail families like it did mine. So I tell my story because it isn't just mine. It's my family's, it's my parents', it's the story of so many others. Other children that were forced to grow up too soon, families that were left to struggle because of systemic neglect, and communities forced to fight for every basic human right. But we can change this, and we must change this, because no one deserves to feel invisible like my family. And no one deserves to be ignored by the systems that are meant to serve them. It's time for culturally responsive care that sees and understands the full reality of those it claims to serve, like my family. It's time to stop forcing children to bear this weight of systemic failures. And it's time to build a society where families like mine, they don't just survive, but they thrive. So the question is, what will you do to make this happen?